Welcome to the Going Ballistic podcast. My name is Ryan Cleckner, and I'm coming to you from my truck, driving down the highway. So I apologize for the wind and road noise and maybe the bad audio quality, but for all of you that have been begging for another podcast, this is the best I can do. Some of you probably have figured out that I like to teach. Some of you may even know that I teach constitutional law at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. And so I make the trek from Nashville down to Huntsville every so often to teach a class. And I'm heading back home from class right now, and I was thinking, I have no time to do podcasts. And every podcast, I feel like I'm starting telling you all that it's been too long since the last one, and I promise I'm going to start being better about doing more podcasts, but I don't change. I'm trying, but I'm not doing so good at it. So I figured, I have some dead time. I'm on the road, and if you guys can deal with the noise of my truck, maybe I can make the most of my time, and I'll do some podcasts from the road. So you guys give me feedback. You've always been good about that. Shoot me an email, drop me a note, let me know if this works for you. If you'd rather have the podcast like this, maybe I'll keep doing it. It might be the solution for my crazy overextended schedule. Speaking of overextended schedule, I'm late on the advanced version of my book. I wrote the long-range shooting handbook, for those of you that are new to this podcast, last year. It has now been a year and a few weeks now that it's been out, and it has blown me out of the water how much you guys have supported that book. It's been great. I wish I spent more time designing the cover or making the pictures better if I would have known you guys would have liked it so much. But I just really appreciate it. You've helped me raise thousands for charity. So it's been, after the 1 year mark, it was a little over 16,000 copies have been sold of the long range shooting handbook. Most of them from Amazon.com, some through Kindle, some through iTunes. Of course, there's a few every week I sell through my website where I'll autograph copies and send them out to people. But 25% of all those proceeds that come in, I donate directly to two military charities. That's the Sua Sponte Foundation and the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. They're just amazing folks, amazing causes. There might have been a couple times when I wondered what I was thinking giving 25%, but I'm glad I'm doing it. I'm glad you guys are doing it, because I think that you guys are more likely to take a chance on the book when you know that a lot of the money is going to a good cause. And things like the SHOT Show that just happened recently, people have been so supportive of the book there. Hornady had me in their booth to do a book signing, which was flattering on itself that they had me there. And a lot of you guys came out to see me and say hi and get your autographed copies of it. And the Sua Sponte Foundation and Special Operations Warrior Foundation were both there to collect donations for the book. And they raised a ton of money there too. And they were happy to see you guys get the words of encouragement from you all. So we really appreciate it. It's been awesome. But I wish I would have had the advanced version of the book out now. The sequel to the first book. I expected to have it out by now, but what I've been doing is too busy with life. It's my day job, which is being a firearms attorney, working for and against the ATF with firearms dealers all across the country and imports and exports, and all that just never seems to stop, which is good. The book stuff, the podcast, starting the rifle line, which, by the way, they're almost done. For those of you that have been waiting for my line of rifles, the gas guns are all figured out and working. I've had the prototype up and running, and even posted a group recently to my Instagram page. Of course, that was the best group. I'm not going to show you the worst group. No one ever does that, right? Maybe I'll do that next time. I'll show you a bad group just to show you I can be honest about it. The bolt guns just made some great progress today. You guys are going to love the system I'm using. It is going to be so repeatable, and those receivers that I'm using are so precisely made that you're actually going to be able to order replacement barrels and screw them on yourselves. And without a barrel nut, not like a Savage style. I'm talking a 700 clone style action that I'm using, that you'll be able to unscrew the barrel that you have on there if you buy one from me, order another barrel from me, and The headspace will already be perfect. It'll already be able to screw right on. I mean, you'll need a barrel vise. I guess you could make one out of some 2x4s and a clamp, but you'll need to be able to torque the barrel on. But if you can unscrew it and screw the new one on, you'll be able to change the calibers that easily. And I think that's just awesome. I've been using two-stage triggers. For those of you who've been listening to the podcast know I'm a big fan of two-stage triggers. But there's nothing wrong with single-stage. I'm just a little spoiled in that way, and it's a personal preference. But I wanted to offer a single-stage trigger for folks out there that wanted them, because after all, I'm building the rifles for you all. I'm not building them for me. I mean, well, I'll take one or two, but I got to give you guys what you want and what you're comfortable with. And the coolest, best performing, amazingly lowest price compared to how well they perform triggers going on right now are the TriggerTech triggers. I cannot say enough about TriggerTech. I was so excited about them. I just bought a couple at regular price from Brownells for some prototype builds because I like them so much. I wasn't looking for a special deal or anything. They are just making great triggers. Well, right before this podcast started, I got a call from them because I had asked them to be a dealer for, wanting to be part of my rifles as an OEM deal, and they were all about it. They're on board, and they made me love the company even more. When the guy that calls me fairly late at night before he leaves the office is the CEO, because he's trying to make sure everyone gets taken care of, and to have people that believe in their product as much as they do, are making as good of a product as they are, and yet they're still willing to work with someone like me who's not going to have that big of a volume of triggers, or they're willing to just be neat people as they are, man, that makes me like them even more. So I'm officially now a TriggerTech dealer. So you want some triggers? Come get them. I don't even know what website I want to send people to anymore. I'm still trying to figure out this whole branding, marketing thing. I had this podcast website at goingballisticpodcast.com, and it's still there. And you can go listen to show notes and get more extra things about this podcast at that website. But I still think I'm going to roll that into my personal kind of brand website at ryancleckner.com. So that's also a source you can go visit for show notes about this podcast. Now, my rifle company website, the plan was to have them all together, but Facebook doesn't exactly like me having a page that promotes firearms with doing advertisements for the books and things like that. So I had them all wrapped in together, and then I just recently separated them back out. So the rifle company webpage is going to be just the rifles and gear by itself. That's at Cleckner.co. That's CLECKNER.co. That's C-O. Okay, no M there. .co. And on there you can see information about. There'll be podcast stuff there too until I figure out how I'm going to do all this branding for it. But you can find out a little bit of information about the rifles that are coming soon. Not much, but you can buy some of the products too. Like as soon as this podcast goes up, I'll put some of the TriggerTech triggers up there. They're giving me a good deal as a dealer. I'm going to give them to you guys as a good deal. Please know I'm not pushing these triggers because I'm trying to make a whole bunch of business off of selling triggers. I'm not. I'm using the triggers because I think they're amazing triggers in the rifles, and I want to make the best rifles I can possibly make. I figure, though, as long as I'm going to have some, I might as well throw them up on the website and give you guys a good deal. Again, take them, leave them. I'm trying not to make this a commercial, but I'm also trying to let you know if you want to come to the site to check things out, and that's what helps you come to the site is to get a good deal and a great trigger, then you know what? Come get a trigger. I'd love to get you one, especially the straight trigger shoe triggers. They have one with a straight trigger bow or shoe to it that has a little bit of a hook at the end that I just love the feel of for a target or tactical rifle. But I do not like nor recommend for hunting rifles. I just bought a trigger for a new acquaintance of mine. He was looking for a hunting rifle trigger. I told him TriggerTech's the way to go, but I got him the curved trigger. That's because it's a hunting rifle, which means he might have gloves on, which means he might be running into brush and moving it around, and I would like the trigger for safety reasons to hug the back of the trigger guard a little better so it's not sticking out so much on its own. But also with gloves on, it's going to make it a lot easier to have a rounded trigger. So don't just think the straight trigger looks sexy, which it does. That's the cool new thing, which it kind of is. I mean, the curved trigger is still great, especially for hunting rifles. So, check either one out. Well, the last podcast, I talked about angles. I talked about how to compensate for the different, I don't know how to say it, perceived distance. The last podcast I called it the angle distance to a target. The concept is that even though your line of sight, like a laser rangefinder, from you to the target might say that it's 1,000 yards away, if you're at enough of an angle, you actually are going to shoot at the target as if it was maybe 900 yards away or 800 yards away. And the way you did that, as we talked about, is you take the cosine of the angle, and of course, if you want to learn more about it in more depth, go listen to the last podcast. But you take the cosine of the angle that you're looking down, and you multiply that cosine by the actual straight line distance to the target. And that gives you that shorter angle distance that you pretend the target is for gravity purposes. But remember, you've got to use the real distance when it comes to wind, right? So the gravity is going to affect the bullet the same as if it was traveling the shorter distance, but the wind is still going to affect it the entire way. So let's say, for example, you're shooting down at an angle had a cosine of 10. Well, or not of 10, I'm sorry, of 0.9. I'm in my truck right now, and I don't know the cosines off the top of my head. So what is that, about 15 degrees maybe? So whatever you do, you figure out the angle, whatever the degrees are, your cosine is 0.9. And if your target's 1,000 yards away, you multiply the 1,000 by 0.9, you get 900. So that means you use your elevation on your scope as if the target was only 900 yards away, but you do your wind call and your spin drift and any other adjustments you're going to make based off the full 1,000 yards it's flying. So the wind is still 1,000 yards it's passing through. The air resistance from the density of the air is still 1,000 yards away. All that's still 1,000 yards away, but you just use the angle distance for elevation. Well, there's one thing I didn't cover, which is what happens when you're at that angle looking at the target. And of course, it works both uphill and downhill. We'll talk about that in that podcast. What happens when you're looking at that target and you're trying to measure the height or width of the target, or I don't know, just the size of the target, by milling it, or by using a minute of angle reticle, I guess. But you're trying to use the relative size of the target to some sort of reticle measurement to do a calculation to figure out its distance. Well, that can be a problem because let's say you're shooting at just a target at a shooting range, and the target is on a post and it's sticking straight up out of the ground. Well, if you're up high and looking down at the target's height from top to bottom is going to measure shorter in your scope than it would be if you're perfectly flat, right? I mean, take it to the extreme to imagine what I'm talking about. The steeper and steeper angle you get, you should be able to imagine that the top to the bottom of the target are going to get smaller and smaller in your scope for measurements. And to the point when you're looking straight down at the target, all you're going to see is the thickness of the target. And then the further out it gets, you're going to see more and more of the target, all the way to when it's directly in front of you, you're going to see the full height of the target. So that's a problem, right? When you're measuring something to mill it, I'm just going to use that term, even though you could use minutes too. When you're going to be milling a target, the one thing you have to know is how big the target is. Because once we know how big a target is, we know how big it should appear at certain distances. And that's because there's this I guess it's a constant connection between the size of an object and its distance. So imagine a target at 1,000 yards. And it doesn't matter how big the target is or how big it measures in your scope, but whatever measurement you see in your scope, if all of a sudden you moved to a new location and you looked at that same target and it measured twice as big as it did previously, you know that it's half the distance that it was previously. Twice the size means it's twice as close. It's half the distance. Now let's think about that. That's the only reason that milling works, is that relationship between the direct relationship between the height or size of an object in your vision and its distance. If that direct relationship wasn't there, we couldn't possibly mill a target. So that 1 meter tall target, let's say we're shooting at a military E-type silhouette. Those are 1 meter tall. Well, at 1,000 yards, we know from our mill ranging formula, again, you'll have to listen to other podcasts or read my book if you need help with the milling formula. The simple milling formula is you take the height of a target in meters, you multiply it by 1,000, and you divide that number by the number of mils you measure in your scope. I mean, that's the basic formula. That from that we make the rest of them that I teach. Well, a 1 meter tall target, so the height of the target in meters, that's 1, times 1,000 is 1,000, divided by the number of mils, makes it easy. Well, if I put that target 1,000 meters away, I probably kept saying yards this whole time. Sorry if I have. That's not to say that milling doesn't work with yards. It does. Milling works with any unit of measurement, okay? So those of you that are out there that want to argue, milling only works with meters or only works with yards. No, it works with everything. It'll work with inches, right? And also in the book and other podcasts, I talk about that a mil is 1/1000th of something, okay? 1 mil is 1 inch at 1,000 inches. It's 1 meter at 1,000 meters. It's 1 yard at 1,000 yards. Just because it's a metric measurement doesn't mean you have to use metric meters, okay? But let's just stick with meters. So that 1 meter tall E-type silhouette is 1,000 meters away from us. That means it's going to measure 1 mil in our scope. Remember, 1 mil is 1/1000th of something. So 1,000 of those meters away is a 1 meter tall target. Therefore, that's 1 mil. Okay, we got that. We can even do the formula if you want. 1 times 1,000 is 1,000 divided by 1. That means the target must have been 1,000 meters away if it measured 1 mil tall. Now, bring the target half the distance, twice as close. Bring it to 500 yards. How much bigger is the target going to appear? Well, we've already hinted at it. I've already told you. It's going to appear exactly twice as big because it's exactly half the distance. But we can do the math too. It's going to look 2 mils tall. I know that because now I can do the 1 meter tall target times the constant of 1,000 divided by the 2 mils that I'm seeing in the scope equals 500 yards. Therefore, or meters, sorry, did it again. Therefore, in order for a target to be 500 meters away, it's got to appear 2 mils tall. There's that relationship. Well, what if I half it again? What if I go from 500 to 250? Well, if I twice as close or half the distance, I'm doubling the size. So I jump from 2 mils to 4 mils now. So at 250 yards, that 1 meter target's gonna be 4 mils tall. At 500 meters, man, I'm all over the place with distances and units. Let me start over. 250 meters away, that 1 meter tall target is going to be 4 mils. Double the distance, get it out to 500 meters. It's going to appear half as big, 2 mils. Double the distance, get out to 1,000 meters. It's going to appear half the height, 1 mil. Okay, that relationship is the only reason all this works. Well, from that, we know that the smaller a target appears, the further away it is. Well, now we got the problem with the angles. When you're looking down at the target, and I just told you that the height of the target is going to appear shorter as long as it's straight out of the ground, because that's at an angle now. When you measure it, you're going to get a false measurement if you don't take that angle into account. If you just measure it and try and do the formula that it's a 1 meter tall target, you're going to get a bad number because it's not appearing the right height. So I think I've covered it, but I'm going to give you a chance to think about it for a second. If it appears too small, if it appears smaller than it really is, and you forget to account for it, and you mill that target to get the distance, and I just told you that your distance number is going to be wrong, which way is it going to be wrong? Is it going to seem like it's too far away, or is it going to seem like it's too close? Well, I hope you got that it's going to be too far away, artificially too far. You're right, because it's appearing to be smaller, and we just covered that the smaller things are, the further away they are. So if you don't take that angle into account and you mill the target, you're going to think it's further away than it is, you're going to adjust for that distance, and you're going to shoot straight over the target. Matter of fact, it's going to kind of be double the problem if you don't take any of the angle into it. Not only if you shoot at that 1,000 meter away target, when we talked about at the angle, and I figured out that whatever the cosine is for 0.9, that you should have shot it like it was 900, not only are you going to shoot way over because of that, but now it's going to be even worse because if you figured the distance out by milling it, you're going to think the target was even further than 1,000 meters away because of the angle. So we have 2 angle problems we got to figure out here. Now I'm breaking this down on purpose. 2 angle problems. The first angle problem is compensating for the different effect gravity is going to have. I mean, it's still pulling on the bullet, but I mean the different result it's going to have from the gravity. That's the first angle problem. And that's what we covered the last podcast. We covered how to compensate for what elevation adjustment you're going to use when a target's at a certain angle. But I just assumed you're using a laser rangefinder. You knew the distance of the target. So you have one angle problem, you use the cosine once. So think of the cosine as an angle killer. Okay, so the angle's the problem. Let's break that cosine out and use it to kill the angle, to get rid of the problem that the angle's introducing. Well, now we have another angle problem, which is milling the target. It's appearing too small. How do we compensate for it? That's right, use the cosine again. So if I'm milling the height of a target, or the size, I shouldn't say height, any dimension of the target I'm milling. And that measurement is going to be wrong because of an angled view. In order to correct the angled view to what the normal view would be, I use the cosine. But then, that just gets me to whatever the actual distance is. To figure out the angle distance to the target that I'm going to use for elevation, I have to use the cosine again. I'm sorry that sounds confusing. It's so much easier if I could draw this out when I'm talking, but I can't on a podcast or in my truck, so I'm sorry. But just remember, whenever there's an angle problem introduced, you use the cosine to kill it or erase it or get rid of it. So laser rangefinder, get the distance to a target, but you're shooting at an angle, you only have one angle problem. Use the cosine once. If you're trying to mill an angled target, you're not going to be able to get the true distance, so use the cosine to get the true distance. Now, to convert from the true distance to the angle distance, you have a second angle problem, so use the exact same cosine again. So if I milled an angled target and I thought it was 1,000 yards away, back to meters, I'll go back to meters again. I mill an angled target, and it appears from the mill calculation to be 1,000 meters away. And for whatever angle I'm looking at, I know the cosine is 90. To get rid of that artificial reading I'm getting, because the angled view of the target, I multiply it by the cosine. So 1,000 meters times 0.9 gives me 900 meters. Now I know that the angled view target is really a true distance of 900 meters away. That's what a laser rangefinder would tell me. But now, since I'm shooting downward at an angle, I still have to get rid of that angle distance problem. So I multiply it again by the cosine 0.9, which gives me 810 meters. That's a huge difference. If I didn't account for those two things twice, I'd be shooting at a 1,000 meter target, or shooting at an 810 meter target as if we're 1,000 meters away. That's called a huge miss, folks. So there you go, a new angle problem for you. Well, now I got an easier way. I'm sorry for giving you this big, complicated process and then telling you that there's an easier way to do it. But the easiest way to avoid that angle problem is just avoid the angle problem. If you're looking at an E-type silhouette that's standing straight out of the ground and you're worried that you have an angled view from the top to the bottom, well, who says you have to measure from the top to the bottom? I bring it up that way first because almost everybody is used to milling a target from top to bottom. And I mean, with a silhouette, it makes sense. You want to measure the longest part so it's easier to see, because as you get down to those tenths of a mil in your scope, a tenth of a mil makes a huge difference as you know how far away the target can be. You know, the further it gets out, the harder it is to get precise. So you always want to measure the biggest side. Except for in this case, if I'm looking at the angled view and the top to bottom is no longer an accurate representation of the full height of the target, do you know what is still an accurate representation? The width. No matter how much you spun a target, you know, if I went out there and held a silhouette between my fingers on each side of the target and I rotated it, you know, from top to bottom, and I spun it, my fingers would stay the same width apart. So regardless of how much the height changes because of an angled view, the width is always going to be the same. So don't forget to learn the width of certain targets so that you can just avoid this whole angle problem altogether and just mill the width of a target, which isn't effective. Now remember, mill the width in the middle. If you mill the width at the top, of course, an angled target at the top is going to look wider and the bottom is going to look narrower. Not by much, but it can affect you. So that's a way to do it. But it's not always foolproof, right? You could be shooting at a target that could be twisted on a post. So now your top to bottom and your side to side angle are messed up. What do you do then? I don't know. Do your best to guess what angle the target is from you and do the math. Carry a laser rangefinder with you. Use something else. You know, do something, but you at least now have some options, or at least aware of a problem that can happen if you don't take the angled view and the angled distance into account when you're shooting at a target. So I hope that helps. What else is there to talk about? Any more updates? I'm trying to rack my brain right now. You know, I don't. I wish I could tell you more about the rifles, but I kind of can't because I'm nervous that things are going to change. I'll try to do more podcasts. I'm sorry this one got cut short. I normally do a Q&A of the answers people write in, but I can't do it in my truck. So you guys are going to get a sub half-hour podcast. I hope it's better than nothing. I really appreciate your support, guys. The more feedback you give me, good or bad, the more it encourages me to keep doing these. Remember, you can check out the podcast website at goingballisticpodcast.com. check out my website at ryancleckner.com, the rifle website at cleckner.co. Please, if you haven't yet, go pick up a copy of the Long Range Shooting Handbook. You can get that at Amazon. And if you have a copy and you like it, go leave some good feedback. That's just going to help other people find it and sell more copies for me and raise more money for charity. So I'm going to appreciate it all around. And if you don't like it, I don't know, keep your damn opinion to yourself. I'm just kidding. Reach out to me. I try to respond everywhere within 24 hours. It gets hard sometimes, but I know there's a day that I won't be getting emails. So while I'm getting them in the questions, I love them. Send them on in, or go find me on Facebook and send them there. We can get the discussion going. All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. I'll try to be better. I hope you learned something. Till next time, take care.